Alrighty, everyone. Good evening and welcome to tonight's weather chat with Timmy. I know we've been gone the past couple of weeks around the holidays and everything, but now we are back to our regularly scheduled schedule. And sure enough, we have ourselves a very interesting area of low pressure to take a look at this evening. Kind of a strong one that's working its way across the central part of the U.S. And with it, of course, is some snow. But as we typically see, especially in the wintertime with some of these stronger lows, that there is a bit more than just snow with them. Sometimes there is a little bit in the way of severe weather, and we do have a little bit of that across parts of the Gulf Coast. So, without any further ado, everyone, let's go ahead and take a look over at our good friend, the latest weather map here, and we'll take a look at what's going on over here at the surface. So, this is our area of low pressure. Check it out right over the Oklahoma Panhandle. Very low center of pressure there, about 991 millibars, and you can see that this guy is producing quite a bit in the way of some difference in weather here. As a matter of fact, their temperatures sitting in the 60s across parts of East Texas, back across Central Texas, though temperatures there in the 50s. But there is a little bit of colder air working its way out of the mountain area, or not mountain area, the Rocky Mountains. There we go. And basically, you can see here, look at that temperature there around parts north of Denver. They're about 4 degrees in the higher elevations with some snow. That air is making its way downwards here in the form of some very windy conditions. And take a look at some of these wind reports. Winds at the surface in parts of western Kansas, around 40 miles an hour sustained winds. So very, very windy there. And we tend to see that with these strong low pressures, especially on the northern edge of them. So with that in mind, everyone, let's kind of take a little bit here of a look at the atmospheric setup. Now, the difference with this area of low pressure compared to what we might see in more of a less a normal or more normal winter is that if we look further up towards the north, there really isn't a lot in the way of really cold air. Now, mind you, the air is still somewhat cold, but not necessarily kind of some of the values we'd be expecting to see at this time of the year. So, because of that, even though this is a strong area of low pressure and it does have a decent temperature contrast to work with, this thing is going to mainly be in the way of some snow, but there's going to be a lot more rain associated with it, especially as it makes its way across the Midwest. Just given the fact that it doesn't necessarily have the most cold air to work with here. So not necessarily the biggest snowfall maker, but certainly will be producing some decent snowfall totals, but maybe not as much as what we would expect, let's say, if the temperature is further up towards the north, or maybe about 10 or 20 degrees colder. Regardless of the fact, you can see we have this frontal boundary that just kind of stalled out across parts of the plains going up into the upper Midwest. And that area of low pressure is just going to kind of more or less ride a little bit along that frontal boundary there. Further down to the south, temperature is much more warm and a lot more humid down there. Look at those temperatures sitting in the mid 60s. And again, because of that, there is a little bit in the way of some strong and even some severe thunderstorms that have been occurring down that way. And that's not just going to be the case for tonight, but as we go into the day tomorrow and that low pressure does track its way a little bit more to the northeast, severe weather will once again be a possibility across our usual places this time of the year, mainly the deep south. So with that in mind, everyone, let's take a little bit of a look here overall at what we are going to be expecting to see with this area of low pressure as it does try to traverse itself over the next couple of days. So this here is just one particular forecast model. We'll go ahead and zoom it out a little bit, but what I really want you guys to focus on here is more or less going to be this center panel right here. So let's go ahead and kind of time this thing out a little bit. And basically what you see going on here is we go our way through the rest of the overnight. The main parent low pressure will basically be in Oklahoma, and it'll try to work its way towards the Tulsa area after midnight tonight, and then eventually heading into parts of Missouri as we go into tomorrow morning. Overall, this thing is occluding. We'll take a look at that upper level chart here in just a few moments, but basically we can see that this low pressure tracks its way right over Missouri heading into the day tomorrow. Very pronounced cold front with it here. We got a lot of overrunning. This thing did tap into some Gulf moisture, and it is trying to bring that up towards the north. And that's going to help to produce some snow when that warm, moist air kind of goes over that cooler air that's in place in parts of the Midwest. And that will transition some of that over to some snow. But again, because the temperature profiles across much of the lower part of the Midwest, not very cold for this time of the year. Again, a lot of this is probably going to end up being some rain, but we'll come back to that here in a moment. But let's just take a look at that low pressure as it tracks its way into Illinois going into tomorrow afternoon, pretty much centering itself right over Chicago. snow as we go into tomorrow evening. Now, at this point, that low pressure is still going to be pretty strong, may actually be a little bit stronger than what it is going to be right now. And you can see here that the pressure gradient here on the northern edge of this. Look how tight that is. That might not look like a lot to for those of you who might not be familiar with it, but when you see a very tight pressure gradient like that, that's going to be some very gusty winds, and we're already seeing that down across parts of Oklahoma this evening, or sorry, across western Kansas this evening. So again, those windy conditions likely going to eventually make their way further up into the upper part of the Midwest. May even be interesting to see exactly how high some of those winds will be getting. What happens though as we go through tomorrow night? Well, let's take a little bit of a look here. That low works its way over Michigan and even probably intensifies even a little bit more. And again, folks, this is going to be a relatively strong area of low pressure that is going to be making its way through there. So again, because of that, we are going to be seeing some relatively decent going to be seeing some relatively decent winds with that low pressure. So a lot of things going on with that. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of a look at our good friend, the upper level chart here. And again, when we have these strong areas of low pressure, a lot of times these are very good examples to kind of use when you want to explain more about the upper level wind structures and everything that go with these. So let's go ahead and we're going to take a look at what is known as the 500 millibar map. Now, again, this is looking about 15 to 18,000 feet above the Earth's surface. So not necessarily surface conditions, but at this altitude, again, we really kind of start to see the effects of friction becoming, well, the effects of friction are I don't want to say negligible, but very, very close to zero when you get going up to this altitude. So sometimes it is kind of interesting to see how things shape around. So basically, what's going on here, folks, is we have this very defined upper level trough that has just pushed its way out of the Rocky Mountains, and you can see it is centered right over Oklahoma. In meteorology, we call this kind of a stacked scenario. We have our surface low pressure across western Oklahoma, and it is directly underneath of that closed upper level low there. So, kind of a colder air column, a little bit difficult for that low pressure to, really continue to lift air. But if we look just a little bit down to the bottom right here, of this wonderful little closed low here, you can see this enhanced level of wind here. So the winds are kind of making their way in, and then they're accelerating as they go around the base of that upper level low, and then they begin to kind of slow down a little bit as they work their way across parts of Missouri. Now, that's an area what we call upper level divergence, which is good if you're an area of low pressure. Again, there is more air leaving the column than there is going into it. So typically what we see around this area is potentially a new surface low pressure trying to develop, but it also helps to kind of maintain the original area of low pressure so long as it's not too stacked here. So again, very decent upper level winds there with this. And again, you can see how it then kind of just trickles off a little bit, not much. So again, this is a very pronounced area of low pressure, not only at the surface, but also in the upper levels. And again, there is a lot more that is going on with this. In fact, if we were to look a little bit closer down to the surface, we're looking only now about a couple thousand feet up. And you can see how that Gulf moisture is kind of being pulled in the lower levels here. And again, also some of that warmer temperatures there. So that's where this thing is getting a lot of its moisture from, as this is typically is the case. So again, temperatures a bit colder further up towards the north, but again, not necessarily quite as cold as what we would want if we were going to be talking about a very strong surface low pressure. So let's take a look here at the WPC here. What do they got going on here with this system? Now, obviously, across parts of the Midwest, Iowa, Kansas, parts of Nebraska, even going into Minnesota and Wisconsin tonight, there will likely be some snow. Again, this is not going to be an all rain event. Obviously, there is going to be quite a bit of snow, and as you can see, though, as that low pressure tracks its way through Oklahoma tonight, going into Missouri tomorrow, temperatures might warm up across parts of the lower Great Lakes just enough that if there is any snowfall in the morning across parts of northern Indiana and northern Ohio, it could very well transition over to rain. Meanwhile, places like Chicago may stay as snow for a good majority of their event. But because of where the temperatures are going to be, this is probably going to be somewhat of a very heavy wet snow. All right, at this type of temperature, what we're looking at here is snowfall ratio is about 1 to 8. So about 1 inch of liquid equals about 8 inches of snowfall. Typically, when we're dealing with these midwinter systems, the ratio tends to be a little bit bigger if the temperatures are lower. But places like Chicago, Milwaukee, even going over Davenport, could very well be seeing more or less a very heavy, wet snow that could maybe be kind of heavy at times. So, not necessarily going to probably be feet of snow, but with that ratio, there'll certainly be a heavy, wet snow that will be a little bit tricky to shovel away without having to take a few breaks. Meanwhile, something also kind of cool that you can see, at least on this particular map here, is take a look back across parts of the Appalachians in northern Pennsylvania. That colder air kind of gets locked in the valleys a little bit. So even though temperatures are trying to rise a little bit, some of that colder air is still locked in there, probably keeping some of that as snow or maybe even a little bit in the way of some freezing rain. By the time we get towards tomorrow evening, there is that center of low pressure moving its way into Michigan, much stronger than probably what it is right now. And again, we can see that cooler air trying to come in on the backside of the system. But as mentioned, because we don't have a really cold air mass like we would typically kind of have this time of the year, it's been a little bit above average in a lot of these places. Especially across the upper Midwest. It was a very warm December. Because the air is not quite as cold as what we'd want it to be, when that colder air does wrap itself around on the backside, it might try to transition some of that lingering precipitation back over to snow, but maybe not quite as much, just given the fact of where those temperatures are. And again, typically you'd want that transition to happen a little bit sooner to get some decent snowfall totals across parts of the lower Midwest. But this time around, doesn't look like that might necessarily be the case. Doesn't mean there won't be any snow, but probably just not quite a bit. And we can see that low pressure that moves into southwestern Ontario as we head into Wednesday morning. That colder air kind of continues to filter its way down into the lower part of the Great Lakes. But again, by that point, probably a good majority, well, not a good majority, but most of the precipitation will probably be moving out by that point. Could end up just being some more or less kind of a light, steady snow, or maybe just some scattered snow showers here and there. So again, strong area of low pressure system, absolutely. But because it does not have a lot of cold air to work with up to the north, not necessarily going to be probably seeing quite the snowfall totals that we would expect to see with a system of this intensity. Nonetheless, there is still certainly going to be some snow from it. Don't get me wrong, especially across Iowa and parts of Illinois and Wisconsin. Again, could end up being a rather heavy, wet snow. Again, all the while, take a look. That pressure gradient, especially on the northwestern edge, is very, very tight. So not only are they going to be seeing a heavy, wet snow in some of these places, but then they could be seeing some very breezy or I guess some very gusty winds on the backside of the system, in particular, coming in from the north. So that will again maybe lead to some areas of blowing and drifting snow. Though, if you do have heavy, wet snow, sometimes it's a little harder to get that to kind of blow and drift, at least initially. So that is kind of the overall synopsis of what's going on. And then there's another system on the backside of that. We'll talk about that one later. So let's take a look here over at our good friend, the radar. As mentioned, there were some storms that were happening across parts of the deep south. And if we take a look right now over down towards parts of southern Mississippi and Louisiana, that is exactly what we see at this hour. Now, there is enough wind shear going around that some of these storms have been known to rotate a little bit. As a matter of fact, this one right here that is located just to the north there of Bay St. Louis, and I believe we're talking southern Mississippi here, almost right up on the Louisiana border. There is a little bit of again, some wind shearing going on. Some of these storms have managed to rotate. This particular one, though, while it looks kind of like a supercell, does not appear to at least have quite enough in the way of low-level rotation. But mind you, we are kind of looking at a little bit of a gap here in between the radars. We've looked over to New Orleans. Again, we don't really, it's too far away from that. And this particular radar is unavailable at the time. So a little bit of a lack in the radar coverage there, but certainly a storm nonetheless. Has a little bit of hail in it, which about an inch and a quarter there. So if we took a look there, let's just see if this thing has a any other tags on it. But There it is right there. You can see kind of the hail core, if you wanted to go that way, within this thunderstorm here. And there's a little bit of a notch there showing that this thing may try to have a little bit of rotation, but again, not the strongest. So, what are we going to be expecting as we go into the day tomorrow? Well, again, while there might be some snow across parts of Illinois going into Wisconsin and Michigan, there could be the potential for maybe some strong to even severe thunderstorms down across parts of the deep south. Right now, pretty quiet there, and it won't be until we go into the day tomorrow that we could start to see that. So if we go back to our good friends here, the surface chart, let me go ahead and pull it up here. We can kind of see here that as we go into the day tomorrow, notice there is that secondary area of low pressure courtesy of that upper level divergence that's going to be happening. And you can see it has that cold front's continuing to push that cold front through, a little bit of a warm front. As that front pushes across parts of the deep south, that's when we're going to be expecting to be seeing that severe weather. Again, there will probably be maybe the possibility for a couple of strong storms overnight tonight across parts of Alabama, and then going into the day tomorrow, there'll probably be more so far eastern Alabama going into Georgia, and then parts of South Carolina. Now, again, not expecting this to be a big severe weather break, but there will probably be at least a couple storms that might try to rotate during the day tomorrow, so that'll certainly be something interesting to keep an eye on. So, always my favorite time of the year. When you get these very strong areas of low pressure like this, you get snow on one side and sometimes severe weather on the other side of it. You get wind and of course you get a good amount of rain. And you can see by the time we go towards tomorrow or Wednesday evening, that low pressure will have made its way all the way over Quebec. And then we'll be watching as maybe another little clipper tries to push its way in on the backside to maybe help to bring some additional snowfall into the area. Now, that one might try to bring in some more normal cold temperatures for this time of the year. Could very well be seeing some below zero temperatures across parts of the far north there as we go into the end of the work week. So, with that in mind, everyone, wow, that was a lot of information, wasn't it? Pretty cool, huh? All right, so that is kind of what's going on right now and latest on the weather. Of course, I'll be certainly watching this area of low pressure. It'll be a fun one to kind of track here and keep an eye on. And as mentioned, we'll be back tomorrow evening also with another little weather update here. We'll take a look at that low pressure and we'll see what it's going to be up to. So, certainly should be a fun one. We'll take a look at some wind reports too. Like I said, they're getting pretty good wind right now, all the way down there in parts of Kansas. Let me see here if I can't pull up really quickly. Uh, Around Dodge City, they're getting some pretty good winds here. Let's see, we got a wind gust of okay, a sustained wind of about, yeah, that's pretty good. About 49 miles an hour. Take a look at that. 49 miles an hour, gusting to 61 miles an hour. There's a little bit of snow and it looks like a little bit of freezing fog. And we are looking right down here at the town of Lincoln in far western Kansas. Garden City even getting whacked pretty good with some winds right now. Let's see here. Dodge City, let's go to Hayes. Hayes, not quite as windy, 37-mile-an-hour winds, gusting up to about 44 miles an hour. They're also seeing snow and a little bit of freezing fog out there. So, pretty interesting nonetheless. Again, you can see the much colder temperatures back over here on this side, not quite as cold across western Kansas. So, they're also going to be seeing some decent wind chills. Liberal Kansas right now, 41-mile-an-hour winds gusting to 46. Got them in Oklahoma. Right in the panhandle, 38-mile-an-hour winds, sustained gusting to 56 miles an hour. They're seeing just a little bit of what appears to be a mist, or at least a little bit there of a drizzle. So, obviously, right now, the strongest winds are about right here over Lake in Kansas, 25 degrees. And with that, 49-mile-an-hour wind sustained. That's a pretty decent one. Alrighty, everyone. So we'll have to tally up the windfall totals across that area tomorrow, and then we'll be seeing some of those windy conditions trying to track further up towards the north. So, hope you'll have a good rest of your evening, everyone. And until that time, keep enjoying that weather. We'll see you back here tomorrow evening.